Welcome to the CISSP Exam Prep Clinic presented by the University of Fairfax. My name is David Tofano and I work in the admissions office at the University of Fairfax. University of Fairfax is the only 100% online graduate institution focusing solely on cybersecurity in the nation. We offer graduate certificates, master's, and doctoral programs in the field of cybersecurity and information assurance. At this time, I would like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Stephen M. Helwig. Dr. Helwig is a senior information assurance professional with over 20 years of experience in disaster recovery, organizational security, risk management, policy, compliance, GRC, and network engineering. Currently, he is a system security consultant for a major healthcare insurance company. Dr. Helwig earned his PhD in information assurance from University of Fairfax, his MBA in information security from Salem International University, his MS in information systems from Capella University, and his BS in business administration from the University of Fairfax. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stephen M. Helwig.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. We're going to discuss the 8 new domains for the CISSP exam. As most of you know, there were 10, and now they've consolidated some of those down to the 8 domains, and we're going to go through each of those 8 domains. First of all, I'd like to, if you have questions, can you please send them to the Twitter hashtag #cybersecuritylive, and I also have the link. We will be answering those after the presentation, so if you could do that. And this slide is also at the end of the presentation in case you need to get that again. So let's begin. Our overview today will handle all 8 domains and the mappings between the old and the new domains. So, first domain that they have is the security and risk management. Domain 2 is asset security. Domain 3, security engineering. Domain 4, communications and network security. Domain 5, identity and access management. Domain 6, security assessment and testing. Domain 7, security operations. And domain 8 is software development security. As you can see, some of the titles stayed the same, but the content within them has changed. And then we're going to go through some exam tips. Okay, so the old domains, there were 10, now we have 8. So information security, governance, and risk, which was the identification of the organization's informational assets and development, has been combined to security and risk management. So with that is also asset security. So they've taken this one domain, the old domain, and now have combined it with some asset security. I'm going to the bullet points here, but these are just what those domains included. Architectural and design, which was the concepts, principles, and structures of the design for information security, is now called security engineering, which is the new title for that. Telecommunications and network security is now called communication and network security. It is no longer telecommunications. Access control, which is the collection of mechanisms that work together to create security architect for assets management and accessing those assets, is now called identity and access management. Operating security is now reversed and called security operations. So, and they've included with that security assessment and testing. Business continuity and disaster recovery planning is now part of security operations and security risk management. So pieces of that have been split between the two new domains. Software development security is now software development security. So the name didn't change. Basically, that stayed the same. That is one of the few domains that has stayed the same. Cryptography that we had before is now within security engineering. And the legal regulations, investigations, and compliance is within security and the risk management, as well as security operations. Another one that has been split between two of the two new domains. Physical security is part of security engineering. And those are the quick and easy breakdown and comparison of the old domains versus the new domains. Now we're going to go into the domains themselves, the new domains that is, and discuss those a little bit, show you what areas that they are going to cover. The slides do contain a lot of information. I'm not going to read every piece. I'm going to just bring out some of the important features of the new domains. So domain 1, security and risk management. This becomes the focal point of all the other domains. So this is the basis of the other domains. They feed up into this one. So this is the acceptance of risk in all the processes and that type of thing. So the areas that are covered are confidentiality, integrity, and availability, understanding the concepts, and applying governance principles. So the governance principles that you will learn and will need to apply are the security functions for strategy, goals, missions, and objectives. Basically related to the business cases, budgeted resources, sort of some project management, organizational processes, which are acquisitions and governance committees. So this is the overall governance of your security program. The roles and responsibilities, frameworks you're going to be using, due care and due diligence, all now become part of this new domain. Within the compliance area, this now covers all the legislative and regulatory compliance and the privacy requirements. So under these, we want to make sure that the global context and that we understand computer crimes, licensing and intellectual properties, the import controls, privacy, data breaches, even data flow between countries, between states, even between cities. So it's all the legal requirements and the domain, like HIPAA and pieces like that. Things that your company or that will have to be compliant with are now, so you can see as this domain, it really is growing. And with that, it becomes a very important domain. You can see that it is the foundation. This is where the ISC squared Code of Professional Ethics is, and how you support your company's Code of Ethics, how we develop project plans and scopes, how we conduct business impact analysis, and how we contribute to personnel security policies. So it's policies that employees have to have. It's telling HR, this is basically how you should be doing reference checks for security backgrounds, termination processes, those types of things, which are normally handled by HR, but you have to guide HR in the security domains. As you can see, the list just keeps growing and growing. And so now we're going into the risk management concepts, how to perform that, what are different types of quantitative or qualitative processes to determine risk. Qualitative is quantity, so you're measuring dollar signs for the most part, and quantitative and hybrid are basically high, medium, and low. This is what I've seen mostly used in the IT arena to convey the risk posture of the company that you've seen from the IT side of the risk. Enterprise risk management sometimes will come to you and ask for that to build onto their overall corporate risk and enterprise risk. You know, how to implement these, what types of controls are we going to look at, what types of controls are there, how do we monitor, how do we report these, continuous improvement, how are we going to take the controls and keep improving them, keep improving the risk posture so that we basically, you'll never get to zero, but as close to zero as possible. And all the different risk frameworks, which ones are we going to use? Threat modeling, which is fairly new within the CISSP exam. It's going into more detail now, so we're going to identify threats and diagrams of the potential attacks. How are we going to mitigate these threats? So domain 1, security and risk management, is a very, very important domain that we will have to study and really know, because this is, as it said in the beginning, the foundation of all the other pieces that will happen underneath that. Third-party assessments is very important, especially relating to some of the security breaches we've had lately. Minimum security requirements, service level agreements for security, strategies, those types of things all still are now falling under security risk management. As well as all the educational training, the awareness, periodic reviews of the content for your awareness program, developing and training the employees. There are different ways to do that. We have to make sure that the employees are trained and aware of policies, procedures, threats. So this is a very involved domain. Okay, so we got through that, and as again I will mention, and I've repeated it several times already, that is the groundwork for your security program, for your security processes, those in that type of thing. So now we're going to get into asset management, which is now domain 2. So there is much more emphasis within this domain in the CISSP on data as an asset rather than with systems. Big data is coming on board, so now we're sort of breaking that off of the systems operational side and concentrating on access to that data. So we'll have some new challenges. We want to make sure our data is classified properly. And we want to know where that data lives, who owns that data, because we have to protect it, and we don't want to waste money protecting data that really doesn't need to be protected as deeply as some of the PHI data or company confidential data, those types of things. So we want to know what classification the data owner's in. We want to know the owner, the custodian who's going to manage that. We know that IT manages the actual servers where the data is housed, and helps with the assessing that data and coming up with the rights in that as per what the owner would like to have. So there's more privacy controls on the data, and who is authorized to determine that? Generally it is the data owner, but now those data owners are finding now they have to start working with security a little bit to come up with that. So classification, supporting the assets, and the maintaining of the owner, the ownership of that data. If the owner moves or something, we now have to look for a new owner, get him trained on what we're looking for. So that is very important. As we said, protect the privacy. We want to make sure that we have the appropriate retention. Some documents you might have to keep for 10 years. So by the data, by the classification, and what the owner has and what legal requirements take, now we have to come up with the retention policy. Are we going to encrypt that? So, you know, how it's marked, how it's labeled, how do we destroy the media, the data? These are all part of the domain 2. Domain 3 now, we get into security engineering. And what does that consist of? It's the technology and how it spans across devices. It covers the people, processes within that cybersecurity. This overlaps a little bit with the management domain because we are looking more in depth to technology and processes, which, as we know, was in that first domain. We're going to look at security models. We're going to ask questions. So what are key elements of a modern and robust security architecture? We have firewalls, we have IPSs, the network segmentation. So this is going to become our networking and our monitoring of the data flowing through those networks and the identity of breaches and how we're configured in pieces like that. We're going to understand capabilities of the systems. Are they virtualized? What kind of platform? How much memory? Are they server-based, client-based? Are they databases? Do they run in parallel data systems? So now we have distributed systems. There are systems that must be data at rest or encrypted all the time. We have industrial systems, for example, SCADA. So these now all fall under that. We want to assess and mitigate web-based systems, mobile systems, and this all now falls under the engineering phase of security. You know, how are we going to approach these and do this type of work? So when we apply cryptography, we have to engineer how that's going to work, the PKI, digital signatures. All these pieces will fall now under security engineering because we have to engineer the security component into our networking and into our servers. And it goes in depth to wiring closets, to physical security, water issues, fire prevention. So our data center now is included also under security engineering, the physical aspect of that. Domain 4, communications and network security, which used to be telecommunications. Now we're covering communications globally. The risk and controls, protocols that are on how the network is communicating back and forth, since the devices are not all the same, they operate differently, we need to know how all that all the systems will feed together and communicate together. More segmentation, how we're going to develop that, how we're going to build that network, what kind of cabling are we going to use. And this is also where we now come into the network security, the OSI models, IP networking, converged protocols. Cryptography is also part of this, wireless networks, how all this is going to fit together, and what are we going to secure? How are we going to secure the actual devices and communications between those devices? And voices included in that, endpoints, physical devices. This is similar to what we had in the other 10, the telecommunications and networking domain. So it's all our data, our virtual networks. Domain 5, now we're going into identity and access management. How are we going to access these systems? How are we going to know who is supposed to access those, the authentication. So all of that now will be in domain 5. So what methods are there for access controls? Are we going to use software? How are we going to verify the controls? These are types of questions that we want to ask in this domain. There's LDAP use. We got, do we use passwords? Are we going to use tokens, biometrics? What kind of credentials are we going to use? Again, there are pros and cons of different authentication methods. This is where we're going to learn those. This is where we're going to understand those and how we issue those credentials. The areas that are covered, their devices, facilities, all kinds of access, whatever you need to access, logical and physical controls for that access. We got to show accountability, we got to show logging. There's all kinds of management systems, especially for provisioning for people that have admin rights and domains. How are we going to manage those? This all falls under domain 5. What kind of method are we going to use? Are we going to use RBAC or DEAC? How are we going to prevent some of the accesses? How are we going to control the mitigation for this and provisioning of the life cycle? Domain 6, security assessment and testing. This is a new domain. We didn't go much into that in the old domains, but we're going to recognize the importance of security practitioners overall as this domain grows. This is where we're going to do compliance requirements. We're going to know these. We're going to give audits. We're going to do assessments. Whether those are on applications, on documents. This is sort of bringing some external auditing practices into the organization so that we're prepared for external auditors and prepared when HIPAA certs are coming in, or high trust. So we're going to be understanding that type of thing. We're going to do vulnerability and pen testing, code reviews, tabletop exercises. So now we're getting more into, we have to understand some of the applications. We have to know, what to look for in code or advise the programmers. And this centralizes the reporting for compliance. Continuous monitoring, making sure the controls are always working, is another portion of this that we're going to have to collect logs and things like that. So log reviews, case testings, how we're interface testing, making sure that the programs are interfacing properly with the user, that that your web APIs and that are all going to be secured, so no one can break into it and hack into that. We're gonna work with the third-party auditors. We're going to facilitate that. We're going to help out internal audit do that. We're going to analyze reports. We're going to run reports and maybe report monthly on some of the testing and making sure our systems are patched, patch reports and control testing. Domain 7, as we're getting closer to Domain 8, and security operations. This is the day-to-day security activities. We're going to have a security operations center. We're going to know what's done in that center. We're going to be monitoring, planning activities like incident response and business continuity exercises. So we're going to understand investigation. So now we're getting into the forensics piece. Electronic discovery, that's very important, especially with all the breaches now. We're going to know the regulations. We're going to know investigative techniques. We're going to know how to run that. So as you can see, these domains have gotten more in depth, and they've also taken the pieces that may have been disjointed and now combined them under categories that are relevant together. So we're going to continue logging and monitoring those logs. We're going to do asset inventories, physical assets, virtual assets, cloud assets, any of the applications. We're going to keep inventory of those on our day-to-day operations. We're going to manage the media. We're going to look at job rotations. We're going to make sure people are separated out and that maybe we swap duties once in a while. So the separation of duties and the responsibilities, all our admins would fall under this, the special privileges, all of those types of things on the operational side of security. Incident management, we're going to go through those steps. We're going to be the place where we get the first phone call that, if there's an incident of any sort within the network, within the user base, any viruses, those types of things, any breaches. We're going to implement and support patch management and vulnerability management, change management, versioning. These all now fall under the operational section of the CISSP. Recovery sites, so this is the disaster recovery, the backups, that type of thing. Again, the disaster recovery processes. We're going to do testing of disaster recovery processes and business continuity exercises. We're going to look at the perimeter, and we're going to look at internal security, personal safety concerns. So these are day-to-day activities that we're going to be looking at. And our last domain is software development. We're going to be there if there's no one, for instance, in your organization that any software programmer or developer that has the needed background security. They're going to look for the security department, the security group, to help them with knowing that. They're going to look at mobile code, how we're using code, what the project management styles are and methodologies. We're going to look at the software development life cycle. Again, change management for changing code and changing applications and updating those. Where are the vulnerabilities? Software environments, code repositories, make sure our code is safe and that only the authorized people can pull that code out and make changes to it if they're authorized. Risk analysis and mitigation of the code, impact of acquired software. So we're going to actually look at that software and see if they have the appropriate security within that. So that's basically a quick overview of the brand new 8 domains. And you can see that they have become a little bit more in depth than the old domain structure. It has become better organized domain structure, and there's just a lot more studying. Technology changes, and ISC squared has changed the CISSP exam to meet those changes, and things like cloud activity and some of the newer technologies, mobile technologies. So maybe in another 5 to 10 years, they're going to do it again. There'll be new technologies we'll have to add to this and that type of thing. So I hope that gives you a brief understanding of the changes that they've made, where these domains fit in to the cycle, into the exam, and that understanding will help you when preparing and studying for that exam and changing your mindset from the 10 domains into the 8 domains. So with that said, as we've covered the 8 domains, I'd like to go in just for a few slides here to give you some pointers on how to take that exam. It is now a little bit different. When I was the supervisor of the exams in Orlando, it was you had to be in person, you got a booklet, you got a number 2 pencil, and you got a score sheet, and you had to fill in the little bubbles. Now we do have it computerized, or ISC squared has it computerized, which makes it a little bit easier, but there could be some cons to that also. So let's go through some brief tips how to prepare for this. If you've not done that already, have not taken the exam or any of the security exams in general, these tips will apply to any of the security exams. Ensure that you're mentally and physically rested, relaxed, and focused. With that being said, I would suggest if you have to go out of town, that you get there the day before, you get some rest, you just relax, you don't think about studying, you don't study that day. You might even consider that if you're doing it locally too. And you just want to stay focused. You know you've got to take this big test. It means a lot. It costs a lot. If you fail it, you've lost that money. Those are a lot of things to worry about, but you want to just try to go in with an open mind so that you're just focusing on what you've studied and not all the peripheral objects. So you want to be on time. I would be there a little earlier. Bring your candidate letter, a photo ID, bring writing instruments for note-taking during the test. Remember, these are computerized now. Some water, some snacks, a lunch, coffee. They're still going to allow you to do that. Dictionaries, washroom breaks, phones and pagers are off. At one time, they were collecting those. So with the computerized version, there may not be somebody there to answer your questions. We would only allow dictionaries if they were language dictionaries for someone that did not know the English language that well, and they would use that. So I would check with ISC Squared on the exact, if your dictionary is acceptable for that. Of course, you got to bring the letter and your ID. You generally line up at the door. Now, with the online testing, I believe that you can just sign up for a test site. It's not like it used to be where you had to schedule a test for when it was going to be in your area or in a city that you needed to go to. You'll be told to sit, where to sit. Of course, computerized, you're going to be sitting in front of a computer, and they'll let you know where. There are several different examination versions in the room, so each of the computers might have a different one. When they download those, just be aware of that. So if you want to look over at someone else's screen, just put in the back of your mind that they do not have the same test as you do. It's the same as when you were sitting in the exam rooms. We would alternate the tests. No laptops or electronic dictionaries are allowed, or phones. They will make sure that the phones are off. It's still 250 questions. 25 of those questions they don't score, but they're mixed in with the 250 as test questions, just to see how people do on them and if they will make the grade to go into the actual test. Computer-based exams, you still have 6 hours to complete it. It will probably be a little bit quieter than it would be if you were sitting in a room of 30 or 40 people taking the bubble test. It's very analytical. So, it's a management at a management level, because this is basically theory, deep security theory. They do have the other exams that are more technical. So study tips: write it down, quiz yourself, do practice questions beforehand, read and underline, link subjects, and think outside the box. You want to make sure that you understand what you're reading. There are guides out there to help you take these types of tests that tell you what words to look for and what it's actually meaning. You might consider that. I know there's some up on Amazon. So the questions are multiple guess. The best I can put it. Actually, they're multiple choice. So they will give you 4 answers, and you to choose the best of those answers. And some may be vague, and the questions themselves may be vague. So here's some new pieces that they've put into it. So they will have the 4 possible responses. They've included innovative drag and drop and hotspot CISSP questions. Not too familiar with those because I've not taken the exam in a long time, but it's some new technology they put in when trying to take this test. Always read the question carefully, find the key words, determine what is the item the writer is trying to ask. So what are they trying to get to? Read all the answers before making a decision and choose the best answer that's given. And this would work for all certification type exams. Don't fight the test. Don't let the test take over. That's hard to explain, but when you're sitting there, sometimes the test can be overwhelming and take over. Remember, you're in control. You're the one taking the test. You're the one that's going to get the cert. So we want to make sure that you're in there and you're really focused. should you change an answer? There are some schools of thought on that. Generally, if I would not change an answer. Just because your first instinct is usually your best instinct, but that is up to the question and up to you. You want to analyze and eliminate answers. So you want to make sure you get the ones out of the way that you know for sure do not answer that question. It might bring you down to two answers that could be the answer. And then it's, you have to analyze both of those to see which one you're going to pick. You've been studying for this exam. Trust what you know. Don't be indecisive. You've been in the industry, or you've been really studying hard for 6 months to a year. You know the material inside and out. Trust what you know. Trust what you've learned. Trust what people have showed you and told you. And the questions are just all random. They are not in any kind of order whatsoever. So there's some tips that we thought you would enjoy knowing. And we're back to the end of the presentation. And again, if you go up to this this Twitter hashtag and leave your questions, I'll after this presentation, I'll be going up there for about 15 or 20 minutes, and I'll try to answer those questions for you in real time. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that you got some new concepts of the new exam versus the old, and how and why they did this, and how it's going to benefit the practitioners in the security field. So I appreciate everyone coming. David or Stephen, I'm all done. I'll turn it over to you guys. Thanks a lot for attending.